Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the Wilton Board of Education to order on September 22nd. I think, looks like we have a little problem with the agenda. It's 22nd, not the 2nd. Oh, that's all
Well, if
right.
you look at the green one, it says 22nd.
Oh, I was looking at the wrong one. Thank you.
That's okay. I had
20 quick days.
I had 201 today instead of 2011. So.
Okay, could I ask for a motion to review and approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now it's time we ask the members of the public to speak if they have any interest. Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Could I have a motion
So
to
moved.
approve the consent agenda?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll go to reports and recognition. And I do have a brief report this evening. Just a few brief remarks from the chair. Even though school's just begun, we as a board need to start thinking about and educating ourselves to the drivers of the budget. Never too early to start thinking about the budget. It is also important to inform the town's residents when we will be addressing the various topics. Tonight I would like to let you all know when and what we will be discussing at the board meeting throughout the fall term. On October 13th, we'll begin to formulate the budget assumptions for the school year of 2012-2013. On October 27th, we'll receive a presentation on the enrollment projections based on the district's enrollment on October 1st. Then on October 10th, the district testing report will be presented. There was an article on that in the Wilton Bulletin today. Or November 10th, correct. And then on November 22nd, we'll be considering the class size report. And on December 8th, the technology plan and the facilities report will be presented. All of these reports are and will be available when presented on the Board of Education website. Then on December 15th, we'll have our first budget workshop on recommendations from the superintendent. I would also like to remind everyone that our board meetings begin at 7. I think we've all figured that out, and not 7:30. And in the words of a previous board chair, Donna Pratt, we will do our best to keep it crisp. And with that, Mr. Superintendent.
Good evening. It's a thrill. The first item I have tonight is one that I've been thinking about for some time now, and it's a great pleasure to publicly acknowledge the recognition that Middlebrook has received. Last Thursday, as the board knows, we received word from the Secretary of Education that the Middlebrook School had been named the 2011 National Blue Ribbon School. Middlebrook earned this, as the board knows, because of its overall academic excellence. And this award sets a standard of excellence for all schools striving for the highest level of achievement. This year, it's my understanding that the Department of Ed's only going to honor 255 schools in the nation with this award, and it will be a conference and award ceremony on November 14th and 15th in Washington, D.C. And at that ceremony, Mrs. Harris and a faculty member, I don't know if that's been announced. Is it Ms. Markley, our wonderful instructional leader in language arts? Middlebrook will accept a plaque and a wonderful flag to signify the status of the school for this award. I think Julia said it best in talking about this award. She said, Middlebrook School is blessed with extraordinarily capable and dedicated educators and staff members who demonstrate a deep and abiding commitment to continuous improvement and to the belief that all students can achieve at high levels. She said, we are fortunate to have motivated students, highly engaged parents, and a community that provides support for public education. This award acknowledges and validates the hard work of our entire school community, students, teachers, administrators, staff, and families. I thought that, Julia, really captured it all in that statement. Community reception, Julia is working on plans, I gather, with the PTA to celebrate this once they've returned from their trip to Washington, D.C. So that will be sometime after November 15th, I assume. So, and I congratulate you, Julia. I mean, it's a real tribute to you and your staff, kids that we serve. So well done. Another note that I'm pleased to announce this time of year, we received the information, and we're proud to announce that 9 Wilton High seniors who have been named National Merit semifinalists in the 2012 PSAT National Merit Scholarship Program. As you know, these students as juniors take the PSAT test in the fall, and their scores, the scores they earned them a place in a group that represents less than 1% of all high school U.S. seniors who've taken this test. And so they now go from their semifinalist status. They have the opportunity to continue in the competition, and some will be named National Merit Scholars in the spring, and some, usually a subset of that group, will receive Merit Scholarship Awards. So it's a real tribute to the kids and the parents and the teachers and the administration at the high school. We congratulate the recipients. Simon Brewer. I'm going to ask for your help, Maria, on one name here in a minute. Eleanor, be ready. You know the name. Eleanor Clifford, John D. Correas, Rebecca Craig, Catherine Dumler, William S. Jankowski, David J. Lord, Layla Maglia-Bavishki, and Kendrick Ken Sheffers. So again, a terrific group of young people, and we respect all they've done so far. Third award that we received this notification from the United States Department of Agriculture, recognizing Miller Driscoll. They've been awarded the United States Department of Agriculture's Healthier U.S. School Challenge Bronze Award. This award recognizes schools that have created healthier school environments through improvements in the quality of food, while providing both nutrition and physical education to promote healthy lifestyles. So there's going to be an awards ceremony for this group, I believe, at the Connecticut Department of Education's organizing. They'll receive a banner and a plaque and a check for $500. So again, our appreciation, salute to Cheryl and her staff, and also to Brian Reynolds, our manager from Chartwells, for their initiative and work that led to this award. So well done, Miller Driscoll. Finally, I'm pleased, I'd like to publicly recognize, it was in the newspaper, but I think it bears repeating, 2 of our alumni, Lindsay Wheeler and Stephanie Fricky, from the class of 2010, for their generous donation of $310 to the Wilton Education Foundation. They are owners of a business many of you may have patronized, or your children have patronized. I wish I had patronized it. It looks like I did. College Creamery. It was an ice cream truck that was seen around the community throughout the summer. And they own this. These students own the truck, and they sold their product, as I said, throughout the community. And I think it was a marvelous example for other alums to show their support for our school. So we thank them. They are now in their 3rd year, I guess, in college. So it's a terrific gesture on their part.
Good. Thank you. I'll move on to committee reports.
We had our first meeting for WEF. Tim Canty and I were there. It was very well attended. They've got a lot of exciting new programs on the slate for this year. I look forward to giving you updates as they come along. But it sounds like Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader is going to come back. So we're tentatively very excited about that. And they've got a lot of other great programs as well.
Okay, and I would say that we had our first technology meeting, and Matt did a good job sort of presenting all of the activities that happened last year and over the summer, from installing the computers, the new website that was done, the WEF donation for smart boards and for additional training, and then one that seems to be particularly good, and that is having students actually work at the senior center one-on-one with seniors on teaching them the Twitter and Facebook and doing emails and other things. So I think that's going to be great for the seniors, good for community relations, and I think it was wonderful for the children also. Okay, we'll move on now. Karen? Nope. Oh, we'll move on to the Miller Driscoll construction and renovation project.
We're pleased to introduce people who need no introduction, but I appreciate their tireless work on this project. Trey Ellen Dixon, who's chaired the steering committee and has been absolutely tireless, and Matt Heffer in the back. Cheryl has also been working on that. Jim Sachs has been on the committee. Karen. So we have a lot of support around this room. We had presented to you, we had a special meeting back in late August, and we come forward tonight with some revisions. We received some feedback from the board about the statement of requirements. We gave to you 2 weeks ago, I believe, a revised statement of requirements. We had made some revisions in the executive summary of the report that explained a little bit more completely some of the aspects of the program and what we were trying to accomplish with the, it was on the pages 6 and 7 of the executive summary. It just fleshed out a little bit to, under the major upgrades and maintenance projects section of the statement of requirements, and spoke to what some of the sections of the roof and why the roof is an issue. Replaced the issue of the single pane windows and the efficiency, and we talked a little bit about what that would mean. Gave a little bit more elaboration on the condition of the Core 10 steel siding. You've seen some of Sean's pictures of this over the years. Talked a little bit about the toilet facilities and the issues of code relative to toilet facilities. I think there's a nice section of revised language on the traffic circulation and parking, which is something we talk about frequently as the committee works with this issue. Talked a little bit about the asbestos remediation issues at the school, the public address system, which again has been frequently in need of repair, the sprinkler system. Again, one of the issues that I know Trey Ellen has spoken to this board about it on August 25th, and earlier at other times. It's the only school in the district that is not sprinklered, and Sean has had extensive conversation with the fire marshal in town about this, and they've been very clear about the importance of that. The HVAC equipment, which is aging. I was observing in a classroom today, and the unit ventilator was on, and it literally, it was screeching. The teacher literally had to turn it off. It was a first grade classroom. It was so noisy, and so the whole HVAC situation at the school, and then the need for electrical upgrades. And then with the advent of more and more technology, having a school that's wired to address the needs of 21st century schools. So that was the change in the SOR. Again, this SOR had been approved by the board back in 2008, and it's our hope that we can get your approval of this. It is not a marketing piece per se. It is a document which outlines the objectives of the project, and gives some very helpful background information and supporting documentation, so that if we can and when we get approval from the board of this document, it will enable us to then move the process forward to the Council on Public Facilities, which, as you know, advises the Board of Selectmen on projects, and we'll have more conversation with that group once the board has approved this. So I thought it was important just to kind of review what changes have been made in the SOR and open it up for your discussion.
I'd like to request a one-word change on the bullet about the sprinkler. Since there are no sprinklers, replace is not the correct word, it should be install.
Okay.
And with that correction, I'd like to make a motion to approve it.
Can I add one other thing? On page 23, just for clarity, I think we're understating the impact of our preschool enrollment, and I think we need a column that shows total. So we've got special education and peer models. There really is, we're talking about 81 kids last year, and I think we should, that number does, I think, is much more powerful.
So to have a total
Mhm.
column?
To have a total
Sure.
column that adds the special ed
Yeah.
students with the peer models.
I agree.
Yeah, that's a powerful document. I know that Ann had prepared for us. So.
Well, this is a project that started back in December of 2007, actually. So it's taken a long time, a lot of work by a lot of individuals. We've done the studies, everything that possibly could have been done for the site has now been done. And so we do have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a
I'll second
second?
it.
Oh,
It's on as review and discuss.
oh, it's on, oh,
Yeah.
Just for
You
review.
You can add it, you can vote to add it to the agenda as an
consent?
approval,
Oh,
That's approved.
or we can just put on the consent agenda at the next meeting. It's up to you.
would you like
You
to-
can't just
Let's,
vote on it.
let's do it today. Then
Okay.
I move that we move,
Amend the agenda.
amend the agenda to move Millard Driscoll Construction and Renovation Project Statement of Requirements to an action item this evening.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's been moved to an action item.
I make the motion to approve it.
Do I have a second?
You need to
Is there a
second
second?
approval.
We have to vote on it?
We're not at the
Oh.
action items.
Oh, sorry. You're right. I'm getting carried away here.
We have
You're
the
exactly
bullying
right.
policy in between.
No,
Yeah,
sorry,
can
you're.
we vote on them all separately?
Before you move on to it, I'm gonna ask Troy Allen.
Can we vote on them separately?
You can.
You
Yeah,
could.
you can. You just need
Check.
an extra vote in there to add it.
To move it from,
Okay.
Okay.
I guess, I don't know.
Perhaps before we move on, Troy Ellen, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you.
That's two.
A few is crisp.
And thank you for that.
Let the record show that's the shortest Troy Allen Dixon speech
We've ever had.
but thank you.
Okay, thank you. So
On
the,
behalf of everybody who's worked on this, I want to thank you. And I want to thank you for moving it to an action item tonight so that we can go to the next step.
great. Thank you for all your hard work. Okay, I think we'll move on to policy 5131.
I guess it will remain to be seen whether I can move this policy to an action item tonight. Well, as the board recognizes, there's been a great deal of discussion around the bullying policy over the course of the last 2 or 3 years here. And we need to get in front of the board quickly this school year due to recent legislation that was passed and enacted effective July 1st. An act concerning the strengthening of school bullying laws, which led to significant revisions aimed at strengthening the existing statute, has been, this new law went into effect on July 1st. And there is in effect 3 areas that we need to be responsive to. The first is that the legislation expands the definition of bullying, provides definitions of new terms, and mandates additional obligations on the school district. In effect, these are sweeping changes to the policy, and if you can bear with me, I'll try to take you through these changes in as concise and efficient way as possible, but indeed there are a significant number of changes to the policy. As the board may recall, the prior law defined bullying as any overt acts by a student or a group of students directed against another student with the intent to ridicule, harass, humiliate, or intimidate the other student while on school grounds, at a school-sponsored activity, or on a school bus, which acts are committed more than once against any student during the school year. The new act significantly revises the definition. Bullying is now defined as the repeated use by one or more students of a written, verbal, or electronic communication, such as cyberbullying, or a physical act or gesture directed at another student in the same school district. That can cause physical or emotional harm, places a student in reasonable fear of harm, creates a hostile environment at school, infringes on the rights of the student, or substantially disrupts the educational process. So in effect, I'd ask the board to focus on two key aspects of that expanded definition. The first being the extent to which the definition includes, but is not limited to, written, verbal, or electronic communication. The second piece that brings greater specificity is the extent to which the definition speaks to physical acts or gestures that are based on any actual or perceived differentiating characteristics. The other significant expansion of the definition speaks to the idea of the location of where bullying can occur. The scope of that prohibition has been expanded. Prior law required school districts to respond to acts of bullying on school grounds at school-sponsored activities during the school year. This new legislation now provides that school districts must prohibit bullying at a school-sponsored or school-related activity, whether on or off school grounds, etc. These school districts must now prohibit bullying outside of the school setting if such bullying creates a hostile school environment for the victim, infringes on the rights of the victim at school, or substantially disrupts the educational process or the orderly operation of the school. So that expansion then would include off-school behavior and also behavior that occurs at any time during the year, including the summer months. The Act does help in terms of providing definitions, which the board can review. Probably the most significant, which I will cover, is cyberbullying. I did ask Matt Heffer to be here tonight to be responsive if any questions come up on this area. According to the legislation, bullying, an act of bullying through the use of the internet, interactive and digital technologies, cellular, mobile telephone, or other mobile electronic devices, or any electronic communications. Now, the practical takeaways for the board, I think, would be for the new policy would suggest that the focus had been on the actor or the actor's intent. This new policy focuses impact of the act of bullying on the victim and the disruption to the school environment. It also dramatically broadens the extent to which school employees are obligated to report any incidents of bullying. In fact, school employee is defined to include virtually every member of the school community who is indeed under our watch. Now, school districts are also going to have the obligation to develop and implement a safe school climate plan that addresses the existence of bullying in the schools. We will be back in front of the board in December, as it will be our obligation for you to approve that plan by January 1st, 2012. As part of that expectation, the schools are going to have to appoint a safe school climate coordinator, and that needs to happen as of July 1st, 2012. I have no idea who Gary may decide to tap on the shoulder for that distinction. We'll have to see what happens.
Other duties as assigned.
I was thinking.
An obligation that we hopefully are already responsive to is the extent to which we have to provide in-service training programs for our school employees. We have to designate a safe school climate specialist at the building level. These individuals, which could be the principal or a designee, will be responsible for investigating or supervising investigations of reported acts of bullying, according to the policy. will need to maintain reports and records regarding those investigations, and will also be the go-to person for programs that prevent, identify, and are responding to reports of bullying in the school. Finally, we'll be obligated to establish a committee, which indeed could be an existing committee, that would be responsible for developing and fostering a positive school climate. Connecticut, in its wisdom, in developing this legislation, I believe appropriately had a great deal of focus on school climate. And as you know, I'll speak to this issue when I conclude, we have worked across the schools to prioritize a proactive approach to fostering a learning environment where our students feel safe to pursue their learning, comfortable, etc. So very quickly, the Safe School Climate Plan, again, which we will need to bring in front of you, will have to be approved by the board again by January 1st of this school year. It will need to have language that focuses on the prohibition of discrimination and retaliation against individuals who report bullying. Going to have to continue the extent to which the focus on bullying will have to be brought forward and greatly concentrated on programs that hopefully lead to the kind of positive school climate that we aspire to. We talked to the issue about bullying being addressed not only on school grounds but off school grounds. The ability for students to report anonymous concerns around acts of bullying to school employees will be a focus. It will also enable parents or guardians to file written reports of suspected bullying. The schools will be obligated employees to notify the Safe School Climate Specialist not later than one school day if they observe bullying, and then file a written report within 48 hours. We would be obligated then for the specialist from each building to investigate or supervise the investigation of all reports of bullying, including anonymous reports. We would be obligated to notify law enforcement if we had any suspicion that that act of bullying constituted criminal conduct. We'd be required to notify parents or guardians of students who commit the verified act of bullying not later than 48 hours after the completion of the investigation. We would be required to invite parents of the perpetrator in for a meeting, as well as the parents or guardians of the victim of bullying to discuss the incident. Of course, the obligation to include prevention and intervention strategies, to include all language as it relates to these policies in our student handbooks, the obligation to maintain accurate record keeping on verified acts of bullying, to develop, with the state's help, assessment tools which we could use to measure school climate, and direct the development of case-by-case interventions for addressing repeated incidents of bullying against a single individual. So these are, it's a comprehensive list of obligations under the template, if you will, for what an effective Safe School Climate Plan should look like. And we feel reasonably comfortable that we have many of these aspects in place already, but we will have to formalize that and get our draft of that plan to you by December. So next steps, we already have updated our student handbooks to reflect the new definition of bullying in advance of hopefully your review of the policy updates. We have focused on the training aspect as it relates to identification, prevention, and response for school employees. The work ongoing on the development of a state Safe School Climate Plan, and then of course our obligation on July 1st, 2012 to appoint, I would suspect, the Assistant Superintendent as School Climate District-wide Coordinator. I look forward to that appointment. So to conclude, I think one could argue that I could have started my presentation with this aspect, and that is the significant work that is ongoing in the schools to promote positive school climate. You may recall that Dr. Richards presented to the board last December on the comprehensive range of programs that are found across the schools, pre-K-12, to again foster the kind of environment where students are able to understand the implications of mean behavior. And for example, I had the opportunity to visit a new program being introduced at Miller Driscoll called Kindness Counts, which was a wonderful opportunity for students to hear about the extent to which it's important to be kind, be wise, and be a friend. This program, supported by a grant from the PTA, is an example of the effort that takes place at our pre-K2 schools. I know at Cider Mill, the positive behavior program is well entrenched. We're currently working with the staff at Cider Mill to expand the opportunity to use the responsive classroom approach at the grades 3 through 5 level. Middlebrook is well known for the wide range of curricular-oriented experiences that address this issue. And also, I know from experience that the school beliefs at Middlebrook drive all decision-making that takes place in the school. And of course, I do have some background in working at the high school, and the recent work that we did to put in place what we felt were very meaningful social and civic expectations, I think has been helpful in promoting the kind of climate we want at Wilton High School, as well as a wide range of embedded curricular experiences and also targeted programs that we typically implement in grade level assemblies. So to a large extent, again, it's a comprehensive, sweeping set of policy changes that you need to review, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
This is a piece of legislation that imposes a lot of new obligations on school districts. I'm wondering if you can put a dollar amount on what it's going to cost us to implement this legislation in this district, with the additional training, the assessments, the reporting, the investigations.
I couldn't, I could not at this point put a specific dollar amount on our obligations as it relates to the plan. I could speak to the extent to which those aspects that we're obligated to put forward will require funding. The most notable, I think, being training considerations. I do think that we're going to have to look at the feasibility of, although I think we have many capable in-house trainers on these issues, there may be opportunities to work with Joanne Freiberg at the State Department to bring in consultants to work with our staff members across the schools, and of course that comes with a price tag. I think that, in terms of the resources of our school district, the legislation actually, I don't think, puts a great deal of stress on in that regard. For example, the climate specialists, I think, would come from existing staff, the committees, etc. I think the thing I worry about is, as it relates to our human resources, is the expansion of the definition raises concern about the amount of time that our administrators and other school employees may have to invest in being responsive. And this isn't to suggest that we don't have an obligation to do so, but I'd like to think that we're already responsive. For example, the extent to which we address situations that do occur outside of school through inappropriate interaction, say through social networking sites or such. I think we are responsive, but now the formality of that and the record keeping and the committee work is something that would obviously benefit the schools, but will require a lot of time, and you worry down the road if we're going to be able to handle it. I can just speak to my experience as a high school principal. You just cannot believe the amount of time and how it shifted from the first year of my principalship to the last year in dealing with web-based concerns, internet-based concerns that just didn't happen 7 years ago. So you've got that whole layer. So I think, I'm not sure I can speak to...
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The assessments, I'm sorry,
Right.
I didn't mean to interrupt. The assessment piece, another that you asked about, Tim probably gets the same ones, we get multiple emails every day from, it's the vendors, it's a real hot thing now, everybody's got products.
Very expensive.
Joanne Freiberg is working on assessments with the state that are no-cost assessments, is our understanding. So her advice to us when our administrative leadership team, all of the administrators in this district spent a half a day with the State Department expert, Dr. Freiberg, and she suggested wait until, we've developed these instruments. Don't feel obligated to go out and buy very
Right.
costly
And we're also not,
tools.
things can change, but at this point, I don't anticipate that we would target packaged programs, if you will, that certainly exist in the marketplace that come in and address school climate issues. Our inclination has been in each of the schools to develop these programs on our own. On the other hand, if you invest in a program like Responsive Classroom, what you find is there are significant training costs associated with some of these programs. So again, I think it circles back to training as being the primary area where there could be potential costs.
In reading this policy and comparing it to one that we were reviewing last year, I can see where it's a lot more expensive. But at the same time, in my own opinion, it's clearer. And I'm hopeful that that level of clarity will give us an opportunity to educate students on when they're approaching the line, and therefore give them some guidance on how to avoid it. So I'm hopeful that implementing this will not only create a safer, happier environment, but in the long run bring our costs down. Maybe I'm idealistic in that, but in reading it, I'm hopeful that that can happen. It was interesting to me to note the bringing in the hostile environment language that exists in the business section of all of our lives, and it was interesting to see that the focus is put on the victim instead of the bully. The question I had for you in reading it is, did you see, as I thought I was seeing, that you need to have at least 2 events to be considered bullying, but under this definition, they could be potentially 2 different events delivered in different ways, potentially by different people on the same victim, in order to be considered bullying. Did you pick up on that? Did you see the same thing, or maybe I was reading into it?
Well, I think it's quite natural that the level of specificity, as you alluded to, does raise the likelihood that you could have situations where a student has engaged in multiple behaviors that would fall under the definition. So that would be my response to your question in that regard.
Okay. And the other question is, given that this revision is being driven by the legislation, do you have any feeling on how much flexibility we may have in the wording that's already in here? And if the answer is not much, then I don't think we have a lot to review.
Well, the policy draft that you have to review is in fact, I think, very much aligned with the legislation. So the extent to which you could have the flexibility to amend the language to any great degree, I think, would be quite limited.
Are there any, just to follow up on that point, are there any areas in the policy that you're uncomfortable with in terms of your interpretation of the law?
That we could have an impact on changing.
Yeah.
This isn't a change, but I think Tim alluded to the fact that the expansion of our responsibility to beyond the school, out into the community and into the summer months, I think is something that it's, and again, it's in the law, so it's not open to negotiation in that sense, but I think that's a huge concern that we have about this, because we can be responsible for kids when they're under our supervision, but the law now has taken and put us out into a whole new arena, and it's pretty expansive.
I read that slightly differently, though. I read it as what happens in that environment as it affects the environment here in school during the school year. So I think there's potentially a gray area there, if I read it correctly.
But I also think there's some in the law, there's some subjective language as to, how do you gauge, I mean, is any event going to be something where I feel now that the school is a hostile place for me? And it's hard to measure some of that.
Understood.
I think too, in our meetings back prior to the start of school as an administrative team, we agreed collectively that to a large extent we'll have to intervene. The idea that as school officials we're going to be able to go into the gray area of really truly understanding whether a student feels uncomfortable to the point where there is a hostile environment, or in fact the educational environment for that student has been disrupted as a result of something that occurred off campus during the summer months or through cyberspace, is something that I think would compel us to intervene. And to a large extent, I think we do already. It just broadens the scope of our obligation as school officials.
Yeah, a couple of small, but I do totally agree with Bruce that I think there's a clarity here that I think was not in our previous policy. But in the first paragraph, Tim, you refer to at a school bus or on a school bus, and there seems to be sort of just a piece of it that we don't pick up, and that's on a student on the way to or from school in general. And I'm just wondering if a child is bullied on the way to a school bus, how does that fit into this policy? Because
I think it doesn't come in under the whether on or off school grounds. It wouldn't. I kind of thought.
I think that was the.
Okay, so you feel comfortable enough that because I think that is as likely to happen with a child walking to the school bus or walking home from somewhere. So you feel that is under.
That's the way I kind of interpret it.
Purview. Okay, because I wanted to clarify that. I wanted to say that I think, to a large extent, we're looking at this through the eyes of the school. I think this is a community issue that clearly goes beyond the school. And I don't know if there's anything that we can do, and I know we're not looking for more to do, but is there the opportunity for us to at least sensitize other groups, whether they're youth sports programs, Wilton Children's Theater, I mean, all of those activities that are outside of the scope of the school,
Well,
day.
I was telling Gary that it reminded me of my work as one of the founding members of the task force on underage drinking. Certainly at the high school and perhaps at the middle school level, the concerns around substance abuse have been a great focus for the schools, but we've been very clear about the extent to which that is a community-wide effort. It also includes conversations with our parents. And really, this is it's the same ilk. And I'm not sure how that could evolve, but I do think we have to be mindful of.
I agree. I'm not sure how it could evolve either, and I think we could be overreaching in some.
We've already started that
but
conversation.
I think it's an important area for us to at least think through.
I think in sharing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. No.
I think in sharing with the policy with, for example, Mark Ketley, who's director of Trackside, as something that he needs to have. Another group that I know is very open to this, and I've seen firsthand, as has Bruce probably, the communities of faith to give to the all the youth leaders and the synagogues and the churches. I think because that's a group that has, it's part of their. We've been wrestling with it. Judeo-Christian.
I think it should be part of and again not necessarily our
at least let them know what we're.
I think coaches in sports that
the extent to which our youth sports,
the Wilton Youth Council,
et cetera.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would like to see us once we come to terms with this, we're comfortable with our own policy,
Right.
to at least begin some process
Right.
of bringing others into
Right.
into the fold.
And I think there needs to be clarity as to, Joanne Freiberg in her work with us, one of the phrases that kind of stuck in my mind was that we have to be careful that, she said, if everything is bullying, nothing is bullying. So I think there, and again, she doesn't use the B word, she says, it's more the meanness and the sense is, if it could be mean and not get to the level of bullying, but her thing is, if it's mean, and I know the schools, if it's mean, intervene. And I know I've heard, I think Cheryl and Jenny and other principals use that term.
She'll speak of an imbalance of power in the relationship between to students that's unequal,
Mhm.
where that influence is distorted, and it could result in mean, spirited behavior.
The other thing is, we refer regularly in this policy to employees. We don't refer to volunteers. And I'm wondering whether we've thought that piece of it through, or whether we want to include something about employees and volunteers in the schools. As, if you will, mandatory reporters, which is, I think, what we're talking about.
I'll have to follow up on that.
Yeah, for example, I mean, we're specifically in the middle of the second page,
Mhm.
item 3, which says requires school employees who witness acts of bullying. I think we have enough volunteers in the district as well that that they should be included.
Especially parents on a
Right.
field trip or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, exactly.
The, not to diminish the consideration of the point, but it would compel us, I think, to think very clearly about how some type of training opportunity might have to be involved if we were to include that aspect as an item
Yep.
for consideration.
I think most people probably intuitively know it.
Right, right.
But I think,
Although, I think we have to be very careful that very often this is happening behind the scenes.
Mhm.
And it might be a compelling argument that if we expand the obligation to volunteers, that we might have to take some time to go beyond what might be those obvious circumstances, to be aware of those situations that may not be so obvious. So it's just something to think about. And I raise that in the spirit of being responsive again to the very specific set of guidelines that are in front of us.
This is an interesting opportunity for increased education across the entire community. And it's a place where Mr. Hepper's organization may very well be able to assist us, not only with our employees, but also with our students and with our parents and volunteers, where we can have something web-based that people have to go through to participate.
And beyond that, I should remind the board that we're going to have to review the acceptable use policy, which is cross-referenced in the bullying policy to make sure we're aligned. I've done that initial review. I think we're good right now, but we may have to bring that policy in front of you once this policy is approved, just to be sure that we're in good shape.
the last thing that concerns me, and I don't know what the answer is, item number 14, that requires a principal of the school or principal's designee to notify appropriate local law enforcement agencies when such principal or the principal's designee believes that any acts of bullying constitute criminal conduct. That's a high standard. I mean, do our employees know that? Are they able to make that distinction?
Well, I think...
They are. Okay, that's
Well,
part of it.
if I can
Okay.
amend that response slightly, I think that if you're speaking to the extent to which any school employee would make that determination, I think initially the obligation of the school employee is to provide a comprehensive report of what took place. And then you would find that the administrator, the principal or the designee, eventually the school climate specialist,
Would make that determination.
yeah, typically it would be an administrator who would make the call on whether or not there's concern about the potentiality of a crime.
Okay.
So I would view that in a way where it would compel us to make sure that we're getting thorough and very accurate reporting of what's occurred, which I must say is our obligation in many situations that occur in our buildings. As school administrators, we're always, hopefully always is a strong word, hopefully on limited occasions, looking at situations that could possibly involve police intervention. And, to that end, we do have such a great relationship with the Wilton Police Department and School Resource Officer Rich Ross that sometimes, even in the midst of an investigation, we can get advice and counsel on whether or not
Okay.
we need to go there. So there's that layer as well.
Okay. You were going to say something before?
No, I just to agree with what Tim said.
Oh, thank goodness.
I don't know, I saw her going.
Yeah, we have Rich at our fingertips, and we can always ask him a hypothetical
Okay.
question at any time we feel the need, and we certainly take advantage of his availability.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
No.
Comments?
If there aren't any other questions, I just want to make one final comment. This it's an interesting dilemma we face in that the law was put in place on July 1st. We're here in front of you today. I wanted to alert the board that we have, in fact, trained our administrative team in August. We have launched our school year to a large extent assuming this definition as our obligation, even in advance of your approval. So we feel comfortable about that. The training that we're obligated to provide is ongoing. So I wanted to reassure the board that we're not waiting for you in terms of being responsive to the mandates of the legislation. The one piece that's trickier is that the regulations, in effect, replace the old regulations, and it does outline our safe school climate plan. And we're not obligated to approve that till January 1st. So our thought is to include the regulations. You have them. It is in very much a generic outline of the plan. I think I would feel comfortable that you would have a recommendation in front of you that you could approve the policy, you could approve that regulation document as part of that, and then we would, in fact, be back to you in December. This is organic.
We don't
Oh,
approve
you're
the
organic.
regulations.
So your role is to look at the policy, not to worry about the regs. But I do want you to know the regs are in place. Our plan is to incorporate them as soon as you approve the policy and operate from that, knowing that we're going to be back for you to take a look at that in December. And in fact, we may also have to look at the policy again as early as December, just because we're really, thinking on our feet here. We're in fact waiting for a circular letter from the State Department of Education on this issue, which hasn't been issued as of yet, which may mandate us to take a closer look at the policy.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to alert the board that this is, we need to get this policy approved so we're aligned with our requirements under the law, but I don't want you to think that we're not going to be back if we need to be.
Is there anything that we as a board can or need to do before we move this to an action item?
Well, we've raised some
Lisa raised some questions.
They need to
some
come back
language, some
and,
language, I think,
Mhm.
they'll come back to us.
You want that? Okay.
I think so.
So we'd continue it on the review and discuss next week, and then we can move it to an action item
Yeah.
next week, or the next board meeting. Okay, thank you
So
very
we'll
much.
put it on for an action on October
13.
13th.
Yes.
We could even do a discuss and approve. if-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Similar to
That's
that.
fine, yeah.
Mhm. Year-end
Thank you.
financial report. Thank you, Tim.
The Wilton Public Schools ended the 2010-2011 fiscal year with an operating surplus of $1,535,453. We had overages of $322,000 in contracted services, $406,000 in outplacements, $221,000 in equipment, and $134,000 in site and facilities. We also had an overage of $221,000 in classified salaries, which was due to several factors. Special education, additional time, and stipends were higher than expected. And due to a change in payroll practices, a small amount of 09-10 custodian salaries were recorded in 2010-2011. These overages were offset by savings of $1,994,366 in health benefits and $240,000 in building operations, primarily heating oil. As I reported in June, we took advantage of our year-end surplus position to offset some unexpected facilities and equipment costs. We replaced 2 maintenance trucks, funded some technology purchases, and funded some unplanned infrastructure and technology needs related to the high school security project. The special education program ended the year with a deficit of $446,585 due to the same factors. Special education contracted services exceeded budget by $436,000 due to a higher number of students requiring services than budgeted. and the overage in the outplacement account was also due to the result, also due to higher than expected number of students requiring outplacement. Our excess cost claim for the year was $1,408,000. The town received $1,029,000 from the state, which equates to a funding rate of about 73%. After the town credited the Board of Ed to the extent of the special education deficit, it results in a net surplus of $1,982,038 in our general fund. So that went back to the town. Health benefits for the year, as I said before, were under budget by $1,994,000. Claims and expenses were less than budget by over $2 million, and revenues were higher than budget by about $165,000. This allowed us to transfer $348,000 into our medical reserve account. And as we discussed last spring, since our self-funded health plan is now combined with the town, we felt it was prudent to use some of our surplus funds to additionally fund the reserve account. So the balance of the medical reserve fund as of June 30th was $4,063,678. And the three components of the reserve are funded as follows. The IBNR, which are claims incurred but not reported, at $1,110,000 is 100% funded. The corridor reserve at $2,563,128 is 92% funded, and the fluctuation reserve at $390,550 is 100% funded. When we include the reserve requirements, that was just based on the Board of Ed reserve requirements. When we include the town requirements now, as well as the $200,000 contribution that they're going to be making annually, which they've actually already made this year, we project that the June 30th, 2012 reserve fund balance will be $4,271,000, which would leave the corridor reserve 85% funded, the IBNR 100% funded, and the fluctuation reserve at 37% funded. And this level of funding is within the guidelines established in 2005 by the joint Board of Ed, Board of Finance Committee. Student activity accounts, you have the dollars in the report I gave you. Each school maintains an account separate from the general fund. These accounts are used for all transactions related to activities that are not funded by the Board of Education operating budget. For example, at the elementary level, the accounts are primarily used to account for activities like field trips and fundraisers. At the middle and high school levels, the accounts are used for clubs, activities, and class funds. These accounts are included in the town's annual financial audit, and additionally, a member of the business office staff reviews the bank account reconciliations every month and visits each school once per year to review their files and make sure that proper documentation is being maintained for all transactions, checks and deposits. I'll take any questions you have.
Can you go over the reason again for the high school? I was going to talk about the high school activity fund and the size of it.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems large. I think we talked about it last year.
Yeah, it's, and I don't have the number at my fingertips, it is dozens and dozens of clubs, funds, drama club, all of them, plus the class funds are all in there. The yearbook funds are in there. And there's always a timing issue, with, especially with the high school. You have so much money you brought in for the yearbooks, and you haven't paid the bill until you've actually distributed them, that kind of thing.
If I'm not mistaken, I think some of the class funds sit around for
They can
5
sit around
years
for
after
several years
graduation
afterwards. Yeah.
as seed money
Yeah.
for
For their
reunion.
10-year
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give us a sense, Kenny, as to whether these numbers are up, down, over the course?
Consistent.
Consistent?
Yeah, they're always around the same area, year
Just
after year.
When you do report them, would you mind reporting, let's say, 3 years or?
Yeah. That's good.
So,
Sure.
so there's a reference point that we have. If there is, if we begin to see
Yeah.
some trend, if they're trending up or down.
Sure.
That would be helpful, I think. Help me again with the reserves, the medical reserves in the town. The town is, what we see here in front of us is our obligation, correct? the IBNR at 100%, the corridor at 92, and the
Right,
fluctuation at 100%.
right. When you add the town in, the IBNR, for example, goes up from $1,110,000 to $1,340,000. The corridor reserve goes up to, oops, I didn't bring the requirement with me, to about $2.9 million. And the fluctuation reserve goes up to, I believe, about $440,000.
But that one dropped from 100% to 35%.
Just the 35%?
Right,
Yeah, how does
yeah.
that?
That was
Because well, for one thing, we're shifting some of the fluctuation reserve into the corridor reserve because we want to have that fully funded first, and 85% is the top amount of funding we're supposed to have in that reserve. So just for this model, I added the town's $200,000 to the total, allocated enough to bring the IBNR reserve up to 100%, made the corridor reserve 85%, the balance is in the fluctuation reserve. So that's 37%
The town only
funded.
put in on July 1st, 200,000?
Yes, yeah.
And in subsequent years, they will be,
200, we calculated, actually just this week, their reserve target, I believe, is about $790,000. So they'll be doing $200,000 for the next 4 years, including this year. Or more if they have a surplus in any given year.
is there a separate report for this, or is this the only documentation that we have?
I didn't include the combined reserve because we weren't combined as of June 30th. But I can certainly provide that to you.
Could you?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Sure,
I think
absolutely.
that would be helpful
Yeah.
to see that.
Yeah.
That's going to be our new reference point.
Yeah, absolutely, going forward.
Um,
Ken, the surplus that we turned back to the town again
Mhm.
was what?
After adding back the excess cost, there was about $1,982,000,
And our total budget last year,
about $70 million.
that works out to about 2.8% that we
Sounds about
gave
right.
back.
And the savings on fuel were related to our new HVAC system, or no?
No, heating oil wouldn't have been impacted by that. We used less oil. Some of it is from the high school. I think the boilers we put in are more efficient, and I think all across the board, we just used less than we had in previous years.
Because my recollection is it was a fairly normal winter in
Mhm.
terms of
Yeah, it was snowy, but not
It
particularly
was snowy, but
cold.
not
not particularly
cold,
cold, but
yeah.
not particularly warm either.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's an
Yeah.
encouraging number.
Yes, it is.
Um,
Well, we've taken a lot of measures in recent years to save energy, and that's one of the
Yeah.
things we pointed out last fall and in the spring in our budget presentations. In the last few years, we've reduced our overall energy consumption by about 9%. So that's part of it. I think we're reaping the rewards from those efforts.
If we look at the budget for this year and what was originally proposed, did we actually come in under the budget that was originally agreed to? I mean, if we've given back to the town
Mhm.
about 2%.
Yeah.
And the increase was, what, 1.17%?
What was the increase that we got?
For this
last
year.
1.01. No,
No,
It was 1.
The 10-11 budget was about 1.1% higher,
Yeah. So in fact,
so we probably,
we came in
we
below.
came in lower than the
We came
prior
in
year,
lower
yeah.
than the budget,
Yeah.
which we have to make sure that is well known.
And both of those were unpredictable.
Yeah.
I mean, the medical.
I mean, we'd love to take credit for great fiscal management, but the truth is.
And should.
So we took advantage of.
You should take credit for great
Nice job.
Are there any other questions?
Nice job.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Have you made this report yet to the Board of Finance?
I have not, but I'm sure I will be.
Okay, we'll now move on to the action items, and the first item there is the school calendar.
The pièce de resistance. And I sent last week the board a memo kind of outlining our thinking on the calendar. as we talked about on September 8th, the difficulty is that we found ourselves at the beginning of the school year facing the situation where we found ourselves at the end of January 2011. So that was the start to the year. In looking at and there was some question raised at the meeting, and I wanted to talk about what we considered as we looked at this recommendation. As we saw it, that there were three basic options we had in trying to look at possible revisions to the 11-12 calendar for your approval. One that we had talked about at our last meeting was to consider moving, because you may recall, let me back up, you may recall that the proposal had been similar to the response that we took in 2011 as we were looking at the calendar, where we set a date before the last week for graduation, and then we looked at how many days we would have with additional snow days, and then we also looked at the possibility of reducing the required student days from 181, which exceeds the state requirement by 1 day, to 180, and then using that as the way to, and then the proposal was if there were 4 days beyond that, to begin to subtract days from the April break. What we looked at in the past, since our last meeting, the suggestion that was made about moving the February professional development day to another month, for example, April. And one of the things that's I think we concluded, and it's true, is that if you do that, it doesn't change the situation, because it just simply moves out the number of student days to the end of the year. So that doesn't help us. The only way that particular option helps, as I pointed out in a memo I sent the other day to you, is that if you move that staff development day to period following graduation, so you'd be bringing the staff back after all the kids had left. A second option that we had talked about before, but had not recommended, but it still is an option, is to eliminate some or all of the February break dates, with the exception of if you were to leave the professional development day on the 17th and you have the President's Day on the 20th, that would mean eliminating or scheduling school for the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. The net effect of this would be to move the last day of school to the 15th of June, and it would buy us some flexibility were there to be additional snow days in the year, which we will have. The disadvantages, as we pointed out to you, is in doing that is it really, you would end up with students having a run from about the middle of January until the middle of April without a substantive break, and that's a pretty long haul during a tough time of the year. The other problem with eliminating the February dates and the February break is that there's a strong probability that you have some snow during that date, so you could schedule students and still end up with snow days. So it doesn't help you there. And then the third option we looked at was the one I reviewed at the beginning, the recommendation that we had made on September 8th. So again, this is no easy answers on this one. I think it's pretty clear, and I didn't copy it for you, but I was looking back to a memorandum that we got from the State Department of Education last year that said, no way are we interested in granting waivers for this. There was a wonderful urban myth going around our student body and some wishful parents to the effect that acts of nature were somehow would not be counted against the total number of days required. And I've disappointed some kids in the halls here at the high school and other campuses by explaining to them that that is not the case, and that hurricane is an act of nature, as are snow days, so it was, don't hold out any big hope. But it was something that did inspire them as they had that gorgeous week when we were dealing with the after effects of Irene. So basically, that's where we are. I think there was also some, and I would urge it, I don't think this is something we should come back and revisit. I hope we, that barring a unbelievable disaster in January with snow, I think people need to plan. And so I think that people can like or not like what we do, but I think that they would call our office or the school's office and say, I need to plan. So I think we need to try to put some predictability into this for the community.
With that in mind, I'm sorry, you threw her? Yeah. Now, with that in mind, if we adopt the calendar that you're recommending, I would suggest that we put a note here that is very obvious, very large and bold type that says the April vacation is subject to cancellation or
Right. I agree with you.
as a result of
If there are more than 3
acts of
snow days.
nature and whatever terminology we want to use. Please note that there may, again, I don't care, you can say, can't say it enough times, it seems to me that,
Right.
and it should be very obvious.
There were a couple things that were brought up relative to the professional days that I just wanted to let the town know that we're looking at and we heard.
Right.
One was the proximity of the January professional day to finals, and understanding that there's 2 sides to that story. One is kids could use a break to study before finals, and another one is you want to run them through classes right up to finals so that they have a continuity of their schedule. The other issue that I wrestle with is both the January professional day and the February professional day are in the snow belt, so to speak. And those are days off. If we did move one of them outside of the snow belt and needed to call the kids in for school on that day, if we had too many snow days, that would give us a flexibility of 4 snow days.
I think that happened last year. We had
Yeah.
a professional development day, and then the next day it snowed, and it was a snow day. And there was no snow on the professional development day.
Right. So the thinking to consider on that is, over the last 10 years, if I understand the numbers correctly, we've had on average 2 to 3 snow days. This plan, as you've laid it out, without touching any of the professional days, handles 3 snow days.
Right.
Odds are pretty good we're going to be okay. So my question is, can we slide one professional day out of the snow belt to better protect ourselves without having to make parents put the April vacation at risk? And understanding if we have to pull the kids back in on that professional day, then yes, that does mean the teachers are coming in after kids have left for that professional day.
That's the downside that I see. I
Right.
think the purpose of the professional development days is that they build upon each other and that the teachers can use the skills. If you're taking the professional development day and putting it in June, those skills are not going to be as sharp when they come back in September.
And that's a valid point. So the question then that we're weighing off is the benefit of that professional day in June versus families not showing up for school on that day in April, because they're probably going to take their vacations anyway. So,
Well, that's why I said that's an option. That's kind of the hybrid part of the recommendation we had made that buys you that extra, as you said, the protection. So that's,
What kind of commitments have we made for the professional development days in January and February?
I'm sorry, what
What kind of commitments? Have we already contracted to bring in
Building
individuals?
principals would have to speak to that. These are building-based days.
Mhm.
My guess is we probably haven't made, at this point, commitments to outside groups to come in and present on those days at this point.
This time is allocated for study groups. We'll do a lot of work with technology. We're going to do some work with interdisciplinary curriculum. We know what we're planning on doing for continuity's sake, but we moved the district day to November because of the problems of bringing in presenters. And we don't have funds to bring in presenters, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, yes.
We're using our in-house staff and our instructional leaders.
Well talented. Well, is there any thought to moving that to April?
It doesn't help you.
That-
It doesn't help
yeah.
you. You gotta get outside the
Outside of
year.
it. My-
'Cause it's not a net
I mean, my
gain.
feeling is that I do agree with Karen that the professional development days are useful if you can put into practice what you have learned, in fact, at those, in those sessions, particularly on the technology side.
I would move that we approve the plan that was presented on September 8th.
I'll second
Have a
that.
second? All in favor? 4. And the September 8th plan is approved.
Okay, we will need to get that up on the website, get it out to everyone.
Gary, when you do that, could you be really clear in terms of dates, that, you know, just revised such and such date to replace calendar, original calendar, because they're gonna be multiple calendars floating out there.
And with the caveat that you suggested.
Yeah, but, and then a statement about the.
Mhm. Okay, now we do have one more item. The Miller Driscoll Construction and Renovation Project is an action item on this agenda.
Can I make a motion now?
You can. The motion is made to approve the,
Second?
and it's seconded. All in favor? Aye. And the motion passes. We'll now look at the future timeline and announcements. I think the timeline is in our notes. There was one change, I think the facilities, and that may have actually already been corrected, was moved from, oh, okay. Facilities has been moved from the 13th, sorry, from the 13th to the
December 8th.
December 8th, exactly. And I think that is the only change. And then our next meeting will be on October 13th. Any other thoughts,
I have a
comments?
question
Yes.
that's not necessarily calendar related. It is, how are the school-based planning teams going to function this year? Will we be meeting?
I think
Yes.
you'll find to a large extent a continuation of where we had left off last year. We plan to meet in October and November as K-12, as a K-12 group to launch the work in October. And then we'll break out in the October meeting to talk about the specific focus areas that are being targeted at the district level and then at each of the building levels. So large group meeting, breakout session. In the November meeting, we're going to focus on technology in the same way we did last year. Matt will make a presentation to the K-12 group to discuss our efforts around technology. Then we'll break out and focus on building levels. And then each of the building progress review teams will meet in the new year on the other remaining 3 strands. So very similar approach, and to a large extent, we're rolling over the membership of these committees to hopefully include a large percentage of the membership from last year, so we get that continuity. We deliberately, for example, the high school, we deliberately placed sophomores and juniors from last year on the committee, so they're all coming back, as I understand it, hopefully.
What about the principal?
He's long gone. Mr. O'Donnell will be glad to represent the high school.
Jim,
Thanks,
wasn't
Jim.
part of our plan to roll this out to the community, the community at large, parent body,
Well,
this
we
year?
are, the other train traveling down the tracks, if you will, is this continued work around evidence-based results and metrics. And we're going to be meeting with the principals here over the course of the next 6 weeks to take a good hard look at the evidence markers that are being developed for our year 2 deliverables. At the same time, we have an obligation to be prepared, and this is our current thinking as it relates to this question, to bring in some type of user-friendly, results-driven summary to the public on how the strategic plan is driving continuous improvement in our school district. In fact, Ken Post, Matt Heffer, and I are going to be attending a conference coming up here in New Haven on this very theme of how do you take complex data, complex results, and in the education setting, which, as you know, is difficult to quantify, qualitatively difficult to measure. How do you take those results and put them in a way, shape, and form that will be meaningful and will tell the story of the Wilton Public Schools?
The other pieces we met with the PTA presidents earlier this month, and one of the suggestions that was given is to develop, and I've got to get with Matt and Tim to develop a short video clip explaining the plan, similar to but not as wordy and lengthy as the presentations I made in various parts of the community last year. And then we've scheduled dates, I believe, in November to meet at each PTA to respond to questions and talk specifically about what the plan looks like at their school. So that's the school part.
The third part.
And other ways, we need to think of other ways of getting the word out. And one thought that one of the PTA presidents had suggested was a brief, PowerPoint talk kind of a thing, that just a few minutes that hits the high points on it, to give people baseline knowledge of it.
Okay. And then the metrics would ultimately reflect that, tie into the...
Those were the 3 priority areas for this year. Communication, making sure we raise awareness of the plan with all stakeholders.
Right.
The results-driven evidence, and then, of course, the prioritization of really focusing in on what impacts can we have this year through focus at each of the buildings.
Very good. Any other points? Okay. At the end of every meeting, we also give the opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We do have one individual.
Teacher will actually get out.
Thank you.
All right. Tiffany Teesey, 83 Musket Ridge Road. I guess most of you know why I'm here. I spoke with Gary earlier today because I'm sure you've seen the massive emails going around. My biggest point I wanted to make was the stressing of the communication. Being a PTA president, trying to get parents to rally behind us, supporting the schools, and when something like this happens and there's no communication, it's just an uphill battle for all of us. It's hard to sit back and, know that you're not getting information. It's very, very frustrating. As a parent and as a PTA president, we need to know what's going on. We ask, we're here to help, and I feel like it solves so many issues with parents. It's like telling someone you're sorry. It can solve so many things if you just let us know ahead of time what's going on. Because had we not had our conversation, you'd have 30 parents standing in here from the football team tonight. So I feel like just giving us the slightest heads up on Friday of saying, this is where we're headed, we're not sure, we're working on it. Anything to tell us something. Because I can't go back to those parents and say, you know what, come to that budget meeting and support our school. We need this, we need that. They're going to laugh at me because they're getting no information for anything. So I really hope that
Understood.
we can take this, especially with budget season coming. I mean, it really scares me that parents are just going to walk away. So, thank you.
We certainly want their support.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. I think it's a surprise.